What if Deku had consensus override? By Øni-Kai. So, as we get into the story, we would begin to where Izuku is about 4 years old, and he would find out he has his quirk as Inko is basically cooking dinner, and Deku would make Inko forget what she was doing at the moment for about 30 seconds as she would just freeze. Inko would notice that Izuku's eyes would be glowing pink, so she would take him to the Quirk doctor immediately. And from the thumbnail, you might be able to tell what he would look like. He would look basically exactly like that. Not the hero costume, but he would have brownish pink hair, and he would also have that little gauntlet on his hand. Yeah, that would be in his hero costume. Alright, so Inko would take him to the Quirk doctor, and his quirk would be named Consensus Override. So basically what his quirk can do, it's the name. He can override someone's consensus, essentially jamming up someone's brain, like getting them off track from what they're doing. So Izuku would be very happy at this. He hoped to have some strong quirk like All Might, but he realized this quirk can be really good as he is very smart. So he would begin to train on this quirk. As he would get home, he would realize he can also read minds to some degree. So, as Inko was cooking once again because she never got to finish, he would read her mind, and Inko would be thinking about how happy she was and that Deku's gonna get into a good hero school. So, Deku would be like, yeah, that's right. And Inko would be like, did I say that out loud? And then they would ultimately find out that Deku can read minds and also sync with others. So he can basically use the Sharingan, let's say, because he can sync with someone's movements. As Inko was getting the plates ready, she would ask Izuku to help him out, and he would unknowingly sync his movements to her, doing it almost perfectly the way she had done it. Now we skip to the next day where Deku would go to school and start showing his quirk to everyone. This is after Bakugo got his, by the way. But as Deku would be there, Bakugo would be flexing his quirk as always. Be like, I'm gonna be #1 hero. I don't know about you, squirts. And he would begin to start bragging and bullying people that haven't got their quirks yet. He was like, hey Deku, when you gonna get your scrappy old quirk you're gonna have? As Deku would say, punch me with all your power. As Bakugo would do so, and Deku would slightly read his mind, knowing where he would punch and dodge. Everybody would begin to notice this, as there would be cheering, Deku, 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 as Bakugo was about to charge an explosion, but Deku would use his consensus override ability to stop him. He would forget what he was even doing. The teachers would speed out the classrooms to ask what happened, but Bakugo was too dizzy to even answer them. As Deku would get home, he would begin to watch his old All Might videos of him saving people and laughing like a maniac, as he would just start to think about training. As Deku would go out to sit on his balcony, and he would start overriding, jamming up people's brains, making them forget what they were even doing on the street. And it would always honestly be a pretty funny scene because people are just walking around forgetting what they can do. And then others are like, hey, what's that guy doing? And then they get consensus overrided too, so they're kind of made as a fool, As Deku would be doing this for hours and hours, just sitting out there, and he would be having fun while he was doing it. Eventually, he would pass out from exhaustion, as Inko would walk by the balcony and see Deku passed out, and she would be like, Izuku! As she would take him to the doctor, and they would arrive back home. So now we time skip to the sludge villain incident. So it would be Inko's birthday. Let's say Izuku's, how old would he be? He's in the 8th grade. Let's just say that. Sorry, need water. Hold up. Water break. Alright, where was I? So the sludge villain. Okay, so Izuku would be walking home as he's late to his mom's birthday dinner. So he would ultimately take a shortcut. And as he was walking through the tunnel, he would hear, I didn't know that freak was in town. You're my real hero, boy. As Izuku would turn around to see this giant sludge villain just popping out. Not giant, but the sludge villain popping out of the sewers. As he would begin to try and swallow Deku. But Izuku would use Consensus Override, which would stun him for about 30 seconds to the point where he was able to punch him and kick him until he was splattered all over the place. So All Might would arrive and Izuku would be like, All Might! Can I get your autograph? And he would start yapping. And All Might would be like, whoa, kid, did you do this? And he would be like, oh yeah, that villain tried to eat me and I just used my quirk on him. Sorry about that. As All Might would be like, no, it's okay. And All Might's buff form would begin to run out. As Izuku would be like, what the heck? Who are you? And All Might would begin to say, it happened lots of years ago. And he would begin to tell Izuku, like, how he got injured and why he can't stay in his buff form. And Izuku would ask All Might if he could go in his buff form one more time. As Izuku would sync with his movements and essentially grow as well into a buff form. It would be weakened because All Might is over his time limit, but so, like, let's say this. Izuku syncs with his movements, allowing Izuku to feel, essentially feel how to go into his buff form. So, and he would reverse sync All Might, so All Might would be able to stay in his buff form. He would still have the injury and he would be at a weakened point, but he would be able to stay in his buff point. As All Might would be like, whoa, kid, thanks. What's your quirk? As Izuku would begin to say, Consensus Override. As All Might would be like, well, that sounds pretty cool. What's it do? As he would tell him the abilities that he can mind raid, sync with people, and stop what people are doing. And then All Might would see potential in him, as he would offer one for all to him. As Deku would at first refuse, as he says he wouldn't want the burden of that after he already has a good power. But he then thinks about what he can do with it. But he would again refuse. So in this story, All Might would actually not give one for all to anybody at the moment because he's technically healed, and if there's like recovery girl or something, she could probably fully heal him. And now we have Izuku being able to use All Might's buff form. So now we essentially skip to the 10-month training arc. As Deku continued to develop abilities such as Command Bleed, which allows him to put like a command for someone to think about. So basically like intrusive thoughts. So imagine he's fighting and they think, what if he's not alone? What if there's more heroes nearby? or something like that. Another ability he would work on is called Phantom Frame, where he would put after images into others' minds, and it can only work on one person at a time though. So say he's going in for a punch, but it's an after image, so they block in one direction and another attack is coming from the other. His final ability, Omen Lock. Deku can implant a mental seal on a target through direct eye contact and a verbal condition like don't hurt her or don't run. This seal, essentially, he can cause the target to experience a vivid hallucination of Deku's eyes glowing hypnotic pink eyes whenever they think about breaking the rule. When they resist, if the target tries to resist or even think of violating the condition, they may freeze in place, start to shake, or completely shut down. The image is tied to the subconscious, meaning even the unconscious thoughts trigger it. They may be scarred for life after seeing this. Now, the 10 months would finally be over, and Izuku would be feeling as powerful as ever. He wouldn't be able to defeat someone by brute strength, but psychological advantage. We begin the UA entrance exam. Deku obviously aces the practical exam not the practical exam. Is that what it's called? He aces the test, yeah. And then as he would be approaching the gates for the practical exam, the robot exam portion, he would go around reading minds to see who's most nervous. This would be his target. He wants to eliminate as much competition as he can. Those who are not nervous are those who he will be eliminating. He would walk up to Bakugo and look straight into his eyes and say, "Don't get in my way." As Bakugo would feel a shiver down his spine, as Bakugo would begin to say, "Who do you think you're talking to, you damn Deku?" As he would begin to once again see the image of Deku seemingly staring through his soul. As Bakugo would begin to ponder on what would happen if he disobeyed Deku's order. As Izuku would walk off with a smile on his face, looking at a couple of girls, smiling at them, because at first Izuku looks like a charming guy, but on the inside, he's more like a psychological mastermind who takes control over whatever he wants to. But President Mike would begin to say over the loudspeaker, "Go, go, go! There's no countdowns in a real battle," as everyone would begin to make their way out of the gate. Deku is not the fastest person, so he would use Phantom Frame to make after images appear in front of everyone. They would begin to stop and say, "Hey, what are you doing?" as Deku would run past them. Since Deku's quirk does not have any destructive power at all, it does have the advantage of making Izuku smart. So he was able to create a gadget that can shoot pulses of memories that he takes from others, using his quirk to his fullest ability. Deku would continue to take people's memories, shoot them at robots, and give them straight back. He would then see Bakugo a couple of meters ahead of him. He would then plant a Phantom Frame in front of him, triggering Bakugo's Omen Lock, as he would begin to collapse, falling to both knees before gripping his hair with both hands and yelling, "Get out of my head, you Deku!" As Izuku would run up to Bakugo and say, "Are you okay?" Acting like he's saving him, he then takes him to Recovery Girl. But before he takes him into the room, he replaces his Omen Lock with another, saying, "Don't tell them." As Bakugo would get a shiver down his spine, as he would begin to lie to the teachers at knowing that something bad will happen if he does tell them. Izuku would begin to go home, and he would tell his mom he's pretty sure he got in. So they would wait for a long time, about a week, and when it was there, Inko was like, "Izuku, come here, the letter's here," and Izuku would be very excited. And All Might would go on the speaker, on the hologram. he would say, "Congratulations for your acceptance into UA High School. You had exceptional destructive use of your quirk, some that we didn't even know it was possible. And you had also saved Bakugo Katsuki for a total of 81 rescue points added on to your 75 robot points, for a grand total of 156 hero points." Inko and Deku would go out to celebrate, and it would be a very good time overall for Izuku. As the next day, not the next day, the next week, classes would begin. As Izuku would walk into the class to see someone sleeping on the floor with a high level of annoyance surging through his entire mind. Izuku would be like, "Whoa, that's scary." And he would turn his head once more to see Bakugo. He would ignore him and turn to see another girl with pink hair. He would say, "Oh, there's more people with pink hair?" And then he would also turn to the direction of Kirishima and Kaminari. He would go to sit over there because they look like pretty cool guys. He would strike a conversation with them, but Aizawa would wake up. And he would begin to say, "It took you 8 seconds to quiet down. That's not gonna cut it here. Now throw these on and follow me outside." As everyone would put on their uniforms and follow him outside. As essentially Aizawa would toss the ball to Izuku. He would say, "Throw it as far as you can." As Izuku would throw the ball up in the air and charge his gauntlet up with memories of others, as he would shoot them at the ball, sending the ball at least, let's say, how much did Bakugo get in the original? 75. So we're going to go, let's say, 851 meters or something like that. So they would move on to the next test, the grip strength. Izuku would get not that great of a score. The push-ups, he would do pretty good. With the, what's it called? With the 50-meter dash, he would use phantom. He uses after images to just act like he went to the finish line and back, but he really didn't. And in total, he would get second place to Momo. Yeah, Rosie. So now they're in the last period of the day. As they're just sitting in there wondering when Aizawa's gonna get back, and All Might would bust to the door saying, "I am here," walking in like a normal person. As everyone begin to be like, "All Might, All Might." And they would then begin the hero versus villain trials. And that will be a story for another video because I am now done. Thanks for watching Øni-Kai. If you made it this far into the video, please like, subscribe, and I'll see you later.